That was the only effort then. I don't know anything else but that at that time. Now in peacetime or something, I think it's a holy, you know? After Point Blank and The Dirty Dozen, Lee Marvin became one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. On screen, he stood shoulder to shoulder with the biggest stars of the age. But that harmony was a total lie. A newly unearthed list has revealed the 7 actors he most hated over the course of his entire career. Friends who were supposed to be his men and colleagues. But they ridiculed him and sabotaged him and fought for every inch of screen time. Their battles were so brutal studios secretly blackballed them from ever working together again. And when you hear their names, you'll never see them the same way again. John Wayne, the Hollywood hero that Lee Marvin couldn't stand. Lee Marvin hated John Wayne worse than any man on his list. And the truths are a lot darker than anything fans ever saw on screen. It all started during the making of the Comancheros in 1961. Wayne was talking to reporters proudly proclaiming that he always tried to represent the American fighting spirit in his roles. Marvin heard that and walked right up to him in front of the cameras and said, "You didn't fight. Don't talk like that." There was silence. Wayne didn't know what to say. Marvin had been in the Pacific in the Second World War, and unlike Wayne, he'd really been in the trenches. Wayne then left the interview humiliated. But that was only the beginning. Backstage was just as tense. Wayne showed Marvin how to hold a rifle like a soldier on set. "I learned mine at Saipan," Marvin said dismissively, waving Wayne away. Marvin had actually been shot and wounded in battle. "Where were you?" The message was loud and clear. Marvin's knowledge was carved into his body by enemy bullets, Wayne's by studio choreography. Crew members later said that Wayne didn't look Marvin in the eye for the rest of the day. But the true turning point was 1965. Wayne tried to get Marvin thrown off a major Western, arguing to the studio that he didn't represent the right American values. When Marvin found out about it, he was furious and told colleagues, "He acts like a patriot, but lives like a coward." It was more than name-calling. Wayne's speeches were an insult to real soldiers who paid the price Wayne never did, according to Marvin. They were so competitive that when Wayne died in 1979, Marvin was asked if he wanted to send a sympathy card. "My answer, I respect soldiers," he played one. Lee Marvin's hatred for John Wayne was real, unshakable, and in his eyes completely justified. Lee Marvin's crazy-making diva, the arrogant Frank Sinatra. No one had the time for Hollywood's untouchable stars, and Frank Sinatra was at the top of that list. It was not only Sinatra's fame that bothered Marvin. The way he acts. It began with Sinatra's total indifference to anyone but himself. Sinatra had a reputation on the set for his temper and deviating behavior. Marvin caught him once, sauntering onto the set late, expecting special treatment. He barked commands at crew members as if they were beneath him. Already irritated by celebrity culture, Marvin couldn't keep his mouth shut. He strolled over to Sinatra, who was busy barking orders at everyone, and said, "You think just because you show up the world owes you everything? Don't scream my lines like I'm still in boot camp." Shot back Sinatra, never one to back down. The Dirty Dozen was the film that intensified the animosity between the two. Sinatra was slated to be part of the iconic cast, but he backed out. Marvin didn't hold back his thoughts on the matter, and he told his crew, "Sinatra is afraid of real men. That's why he couldn't be in the same scene with us." And when Sinatra eventually died, Marvin had nothing good to say. His answer: Sinatra was the guy who thought the world owed him a round of applause just because. For entering a room. That is not the type of man I respect. It was more than personal dislike. It was an ideological war. Marvin hated Sinatra's entitlement. Sinatra couldn't understand why Marvin didn't worship the ground he walked on. It was not a competition. That was mutual dislike. Cold star Charles Bronson, who pissed Lee Marvin off. Charles Bronson wasn't just a Hollywood tough guy. To Lee Marvin, he was the silent, cold actor who had no psyche. Marvin hated every single thing about Bronson. His attitude, the way he acted in general, and most of all, his refusal to talk to anybody on the set. Their biggest fight came when they were both cast in The Magnificent Seven as tough, rugged characters. Marvin was loud and boisterous and always ready to announce his presence, while Bronson kept to himself, barely speaking to anyone, leaving the rest of the cast wondering if he even cared to be there. Marvin had no hesitation in calling him out on it. After a tense scene, Marvin turned to a fellow actor and said, "It's like working with a wall, and the wall has more personality." It was no exaggeration. Bronson was very hard to work with or even talk to. He was so quiet and brooding. It was frustrating to Marvin that a tough guy who bragged about being a tough guy couldn't even bother to connect with his colleagues. But Bronson's coldness made Marvin feel alone on the one occasion he was supposed to be telling a story with. The tension between the two was not a secret. Marvin, apparently, enjoyed making snide remarks to crew members about Bronson's detached attitude. Marvin himself joked in an interview, "Bronson's great in a fight scene, but I'd rather go to war with someone who actually talks to me." The acting styles were not the only problem. It was about respect. Marvin believed that a real actor had to connect with his fellow actors. Bronson's refusal to play ball not only made him a bad actor, but a selfish, isolated personality who didn't respect the craft or his co-stars. Lee Marvin banged the lazy legend Robert Mitchum. If there was one man who could get under Lee Marvin's skin faster than anyone, it was Robert Mitchum, the actor who treated every film set like his own personal playground. That was the thing Marvin hated. From the first moment he saw Mitchum walk onto the set, half awake, half drunk, and totally unconcerned, he hated Mitchum's attitude. One late night, their fight erupted. Shoot in the early 60s. Mitchum came in smelling of bourbon, eyes heavy, script barely touched. Marvin saw him miss 3 cues in a row. Then he stepped forward and said, "Are you going to act tonight or sleep through the whole damn picture?" Mitchum grinned and said, "Relax, kid. Camera loves me either way." That line made Marvin furious, not because it was arrogant, but because Mitchum meant it. Marvin was furious because Mitchum had a reputation for doing just enough on camera. Discipline made the actor crew members saw it time and again. Men who thought Mitchum, cigarette dangling, was leaning against a wall, barely rehearsing. Marvin drilled his lines like a soldier preparing for battle, pacing the room. Marvin saw Mitchum's laziness as an insult to the whole profession. The nadir occurred at a Hollywood party, where Marvin confronted Mitchum in front of several industry figures. "You look like you're sleepwalking all your career." Mitchum never did hesitate. "At least I don't bark each line like I'm back at boot camp," he shot back. The others froze around them. The exchange passed through Hollywood in a week, adding fuel to a rivalry that only grew colder with time. By the time the two men were in the twilight of their careers, the industry knew one thing for certain. Lee Marvin and Robert Mitchum would never share a frame or a friendly word again. Hugh Brynner, the king who fought Lee Marvin. Lee Marvin didn't give a shit about the politics of Hollywood. What he did care about was false arrogance. In the case of Yul Brynner, that was exactly what he saw. He became impossible to work with. He was so obsessed with image. The tension between the two actors started on the set of The Magnificent Seven, 1960. Brynner was a control freak, his king persona literally playing the role of a ruler in every movie, even when he wasn't. It was not just play. He was trying to dominate everybody around him. Marvin, who believed in a more real masculinity, he found it infuriating. Brynner insisted on script rewrites, often adding in lines for himself that weren't in the original script in order to make his character more powerful. Marvin didn't hold back on that. "You ain't the king of the set, Yul. You're just a man with a big head and a big ego." Marvin wasn't the kind to keep his thoughts to himself, and Brynner wasn't the kind to take insults lightly. The next big clash was over, of all things, the lighting. Brinter, as usual the perfectionist, insisting on the perfect lighting for his face, always fretting over everything to accentuate his features. Finally, Marvin, sick of the delays, told him, "You aren't acting. You're waiting for the light to hit you right." Marvin was stone serious. It was not a joke. To him, Brynner's constant adjustments weren't about improving the film. They were about to flatter his royal image from every angle of the cameras. The two men became more hostile to each other, so intense that when future project came up, Brynner was never even considered. Marvin made it clear he wouldn't work with anyone who shared set with him. That's the story of Lee Marvin's most shocking rivalries. Which name on his hate list surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.